All right, nerds, welcome back. I'm pretty sure last time I said we were going to talk about Chianti, and I sure hope so because we're going to talk about Chianti. Chianti. And if you immediately thought of fava beans, then let me know. We'll have a movie night. It'll be a good, wild time. We'll get back to that in case you don't know what I'm talking about. All right, so what's on our menu? Where does Chianti come from? We are back to the maps, but I tried to do a little something different. So we'll see if you like it. It's going to take a little bit of clicking back and forth, but I'll try to edit it so we don't spend a lot of time with you going, what is happening? We'll talk a little bit about the history of Chianti. I made another fun timeline, and I have one of the books here that I used to kind of learn some stuff about it. We'll talk about some of the laws that pertain pretty much strictly to Chianti, but also a little bit of Italy, the Chianti and pop culture, which we will get to the fava beans, some pairing things, a summary and next time. And honestly, I might have covered a couple of things that I forgot to list in the menu. Also, if you hear the screaming behind me, it's because my cat would like to go in the basement and he can't. Okay, so this is the map, and let's see if I can do what I think I can do. So we're gonna go. So here we are. This is Europe, of course. We are coming to Italy. Should start zooming in any minute now. Okay, there we go. All right. So when I am trying to remember, so Chianti is central Italy, and when I'm trying to remember exactly like where the top and bottom are, I use Florence and Siena as my markers, and you can see we're getting zoomed into them here. I wasn't sure exactly how slowly I needed to do this video. So here's Florence and Siena, which delineate kind of basically the top and bottom of the Chianti region. And then we're going to keep zooming in mostly just so you can see, all right, we're centered right here. Hopefully in a minute, there we go. We're going to the satellite, perfect. So the main thing that I want to talk about here, I mean, you saw the zoomed out map and you can see this crazy topography we're going on right here. So central Italy is considered like a hot climate, but there are so many moderating influences. You've got the ocean on both sides. I guess technically it's a sea, whatever. There's bodies of water on both sides, and you have a lot of altitude variation. So, I mean, just look at like, these are obviously hills. I wouldn't call them mountains, but we might call them mountains. Lots and lots of variation just on temperatures, and we're going to be able to, you know, really we're going to be able to use all of this to our advantage if we are viticulturists. So, all right, now we have to go back to sharing the PowerPoint. So I'll have edited out a bunch of stuff at this point, but you get the idea, you know, now you kind of understand where Chianti is. Now, Chianti versus Chianti Classico, that's kind of another story. And actually, I'll talk about it when we get to the history part. But you can see here, so the pinkish red outline is Tuscany as a whole. And then within Tuscany, you have the gray areas, which are Chianti, and then the very solid area right smack in the middle, which is kind of where I talk about Florence and Siena. That is the Chianti Classico. And then on the right-hand side of your screen, I'm backwards again, always. This is the Chianti Classico region and how it's broken down into a few different kind of like subregions or sub-appellations. I probably should have looked up the actual term for them. But you kind of, I mean, you get the idea. And shout out to, there should be a credit on the bottom of the slide. I got this map from them, and it's really, really just a lovely visual. All right, and then some more visuals. Who doesn't love pictures? So I just thought these were very pretty. Chianti is a beautiful region. Chianti Holiday appears to be sort of like a tourism site, and so I want to go back there and kind of like drag my partner on a holiday to go see all of the wine regions of Italy and specifically Chianti through this. So I just, you know, who doesn't love pictures? Okay, La Storia, which is Italian for history, and hopefully I didn't totally massacre the word. So in the 13th century, and just bear with me, Gaiole, Castellina, and Rada, I'm assuming, form the Lega del Chianti. Now, the Lega del Chianti was basically just a legally formalized alliance. Administrative, political, military, they were just allied in order to, you know, it's kind of like NATO. We're just helping out each other, help your neighbors. Then in 1398, Francesco di Marco d'Attini is selling a light white wine under the term Chianti. He is also credited with formalizing or kind of just like birthing the idea of partnerships in business. And it might sound a little weird, like, how is that not just a thing forever? But it's in an article titled Organizational Invention and Elite Transformation, the Birth of Partnership Systems in Renaissance Florence. So since I have never had an article published in the American Journal of Sociology, I'm assuming that John Paget and Paul MacLean knew what they were talking about and that this guy really did invent partnerships. In 1872, so we've skipped a lot, Baron Bettino Ricasoli develops the first blending ratio, and he had this recipe that was 70% Sangiovese, 15% Canaiolo, and 15% Malvasia Blanca. That's going to be white. In 1967, the DOC regulation sets the ratio, so it's going to be 10 to 30% Malvasia and Trebbiano, and then the rest will be Sangiovese, so anywhere from 70 to 90%. In 1984, boundaries are established for Chianti Classico as a subzone of Chianti, and then Chianti is established as a DOCG. It won't be for another 12 years that Chianti Classico is established as its own DOCG. And then I'm just going to read you a little bit from, hopefully you can see this. Yes, okay, the Sommelier Atlas of Taste by Rajat Par and Jordan McKay. And I just think there was no way I was going to be able to summarize this because they just wrote it so well. So bear with me. The heartland of Chianti was first zoned in 1716, making it the oldest wine appellation in Europe. Yeah. In the fight against counterfeiting in the 1930s, the appellation was to be officially demarcated, but instead, in a move foreshadowing future bureaucratic incompetence, the committee surprisingly and dramatically expanded the appellation of Chianti and created 6 new subzones. The word Classico would have to be officially appended to Chianti to define the true heartland of the wine around the villages of, no surprise, Rada, Gaiole, Castellina, and Greve. So that's kind of the history of Chianti versus Chianti Classico. And then, of course, last but not least, in 2013, Gran Selezione was also established as a category of kind of quality, and it has its own rules and regulations, which we will talk about. Legislazione, which is law. So if it's just Chianti, it's going to be 70% plus Sangiovese. And then you can use Canaiolo, Colorino, Merlot, Cabernet, and it must be less than or equal to 10% white. And I don't remember what the white wines are, so I'll have to maybe put it in the video description, or we'll just come back to it. I have a couple other Chiantis. If it's Chianti Classico, it will be 80% plus Sangiovese, and the other allowed grapes are Canaiolo, Colorino, Merlot, Cabernet, and no white is allowed. So those are the main differences there. And then if you have kind of like the Classico. So this is all Classico on the pyramid. If it's just Classico, it's going to be aged for 12 months. If it is Reserva, it's aged for 24 months, and at least 3 months of that aging must be in bottle. If it's Gran Selezione, which we talked about, established in 2013, the grapes must be sourced from a single estate. So that's a pretty big deal. It must be aged for 30 months, and it must be aged at least 3 months in bottle. So today we are drinking Alteo Chianti Reserva. So it's definitely a DOCG, and Reserva means, of course, it was aged for 24 months, at least 3 of which were in bottle. Perfect. Also, there aren't specific oaking regulations, so it is completely up to the winemaker. And it's just something you will either need to look up on a tech sheet or, try it and see if you can taste oaking. And if you can, then it was probably oaked. And if you can't, then either we're still working on your taste or it wasn't oaked. Do you want to come say hi? What is happening here? Come here, Peaches. Come here. You're losing it, buddy. Oh, come here. Okay. All right. Chianti fun facts and pop culture. And I thought this was just a really cool picture with all of these bottles of different Chianti Classicos, really neat labels. Obviously, the photographer is credited in the bottom. All right. So the fiasco, which doesn't mean fiasco like we think of it in English. It is first mentioned in Boccaccios. I should have double checked. I can never remember if the double C is K or Ch. So it's either I don't know. Decameron is when it was first mentioned. It's unclear when the first instance of the straw covering was, because fiasco actually translates basically to flask. So it is describing the bottle. And this bottle it had a rounded bottom, which is essentially why we needed these straw coverings. Okay, Peaches, you are losing it, and I am going to eat you. which is why we got the straw baskets, because round bottoms are technically more structurally sound, I believe, and they are also obviously easier for the glass blowers to make. So it was a little bit cheaper, a little bit easier, more widely produced. The straw baskets were historically reused, and we did see this again in the mid-1970s when the Chianti quality kind of fell, which I guess we should have talked about in the timeline. Basically, as Chianti became more and more popular, it was produced with like a lot of high-yielding white grapes, including Uni Blanc, which is used in the distillation of cognac in France. So weird. Sometimes white grapes will augment red. So I think we've talked about like Viognier augmenting some red wines, but this was not the case with the Chianti. So the quality of the Chianti really suffered for a while. And that's when these baskets sort of became, you're almost buying the Chianti for the basket, less than the wine. And you'll see it a lot with candles stuck in them. It's pop culture. Okay, moving on to the Gallo Nero. I probably should have checked all these pronunciations before. The Black Rooster. So this is a super fun story. So basically, Florence and Siena were arguing about where was the dividing line between their towns. And they said, okay, you know what? We're going to select one knight and one horse from each town. And at the break of dawn, they're going to they're going to ride towards each other. And wherever they meet, that's going to be the political boundary. Of course, dawn, like there aren't alarm clocks. So they know when dawn happens because of the roosters crowing. So there's, as I said, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. I don't necessarily believe that. But so Siena's rooster was this white rooster. He's kind of plump. He was well fed. So he, crowed at a normal time. But Florence chose this black rooster, and they basically starved him and shoved him in a dark box. So by the time they released him on the day that they were supposed to start riding, he didn't care if the sun was up or not. He crowed. He was hungry. So they started riding. So obviously they had this enormous head start, and the Siena rider just didn't get very fair, and that's how we have those boundaries. The Black Rooster has basically just become the symbol of kind of this area and Chianti, etc. It's a super fun little story. Okay, now this is what I was mentioning in the first one. Thanks, Anthony Hopkins. Man, that's really creepy having him right there. So in the movie Silence of the Lambs, Anthony Hopkins plays Hannibal Lecter, who is a cannibal. And he says, I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti. And this never, I was always like, what? That's kind of a weird thing. So then I started digging into it, and shout out to the great people of Reddit, because they also wanted to know. So as it turns out, monoamine oxidase inhibitors, which are typically called MAOIs, they're some of the first antidepressants. So he may well, his character may well have been on these antidepressants. Now, I read about how MAOIs work in comparison to SSRIs, SNRIs, and NDRIs, but I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to tell you. Basically, they were antidepressants, and one of the things you should not be eating, or I guess a few of the things you should not be consuming if you're taking an MAOI, includes fava beans and wine. So then that's still fine, but why Chianti? Because Chianti and liver isn't your classical pairing. Your classical pairing with liver is going to be like a Côte d'Or, a Shiraz, a Zinfandel, and your best pairings with fava beans will typically be whites, because they're a very vegetal type bean. So we're looking at Verdicchios and white Burgundies. So obviously I'm trying to find this, I'm digging into it more. And it turns out in the novel, the original novel, who I had a note here somewhere about who the author was, but oh well, it was paired with Amarone. But of course, this was I think the 90s. And Amarone wasn't really big on the scene. And arguably, I would still say a lot of people now don't know that Amarone is wine. So the film producers made a judgment call, and they said, we're going to change it to Chianti. Chianti is really well known. I mean, Chianti is the bottle that's on the table during the spaghetti dinner of Disney's Lady and the Tramp. People knew Chianti, so they would know it was wine. Now, how many people would catch that he was basically saying, I'm not taking my antidepressants because I'm eating fava beans and a nice Chianti? Unclear, but it was a cute little secret joke, I guess, for the medical world. I don't know. It's been solved. Shout out to the good people of Reddit for figuring that out. Don't watch this movie if you're a little kid or if you have nightmares. I don't know. Make sure you know what this movie's about before you watch it. But it's a cool pop culture reference, and a lot of people know that line. Okay, how we are going to pair this. Oh, I meant to talk about something else. Okay, that's fine. talk about the next Chianti video. So Chianti is in general, it's going to be like a medium body with high tannin and high acid. So we have already discussed kind of like how tannin plays with fat and protein. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then you're also going to get aromas of like cherry, dried raspberry, tomato, some oregano, maybe other herbal qualities. And then sometimes you'll get tertiary qualities like maybe some leather, some tobacco, coffee, that kind of stuff. So having this with obviously traditional Italian food, we're looking at the bistecca alla Florentina. Now I'm really questioning how I'm supposed to say these double C's. And that is kind of the tannins love fat and protein that I was talking about. Then lasagna bolognese would also be a good option. So you have the meat, which will give you that protein for the tannins to bind to. And because it is still a high acid wine, you can pair high acid with high acid, and tomatoes are acidic. So this is also going to be just a great combination. And then last but not least, of course, pizza. I think I've mentioned before, there's a lot of arguments about like, is pizza American or Italian? We're not going to get into it. The fun thing about pizza is that there are so many options, and there are also a lot of types of Chiantis. So if you have kind of like a lighter, fruitier style of the Chianti, you might do, honestly, you could just do like a cheese pizza, because you're going to get like the fats to go with the tannins, you're going to get the acid of the tomato base. But if you are looking into toppings, maybe stick with like the more vegetable pizza. So do a margarita pizza. It's going to have leaves, tomatoes, onions, lots of like light things to go with the lighter wine. If you have a fuller bodied Chianti with a lot of those tertiary flavors, I mean, I would immediately recommend like a meat-based pizza. And then if you're not a meat eater, think of earthier kind of food. So maybe like artichoke hearts, black olives, mushrooms, that kind of earthier vegetables to go with your fuller bodied Chiantis. I am a sucker for white pizzas, love them, but I would have to be really careful trying to pair that with a Chianti. I would want probably a lighter, fruitier one. No, I think, yeah, I would stick with a lighter, fruitier one, but I would actually go then with the earthy vegetables. So maybe a white pizza with like spinach, mushrooms. I'll put black olives on my half because my partner doesn't like black olives. Lots of pizza options. So if you're looking for kind of like, I love champagne and potato chips, Chianti and pizza. Great, great pairings. You can do a nice expensive Chianti, not spend as much on the pizza. All right, so grazie, thank you. I listed some of the websites where I got pictures and information. I probably didn't list all of them. Thanks to Anthony Hopkins and Strongheart Productions for making Silence of the Lambs creepy heck movie. The fine people of Reddit for doing all the investigations into the MAOIs and how it plays with Chianti and fava beans. Probably I forgot some people I should be thanking, like my partner. Oh, no, I put him. My partner for reminding me to talk about the baskets, because I completely forgot that was a thing since I typically don't buy that Chianti. And also for putting up with the fact that we have wine books scattered literally everywhere. All right, what are we drinking? Like I said, it's this Alteo Chianti. I got this from Viticulture in Virginia. No surprises there. Doesn't really talk a whole lot about it. It just said, ooh. Named this wine Alteo after her two sons, Alessandro and Matteo. Oh, that's cute. And chose mischievous Bacchus as a fitting image. That's hysterical. So this is a 2019, and I probably jostled it a little more than I meant to, bringing it up from the basement. So I did decant just a little bit of it. Gonna see if I can somehow get this to show you the color. I think, yeah. Before I see if I can get this, I actually wine doing this. All right, maybe tell. It's like a nice ruby color with these tinges that can. I would be torn if I were gonna call this ruby or garnet, especially because I'm on a brown table. But regardless, ooh, that smells nice. Definitely high acid, salivating, high tannin, kind of like a powdery tannin, which now kind of makes sense why it would go so well with like lasagna and pizza. Lots of tart cherry on the finish. And an herbal, but I'm not sure if it would be oregano. This also might need to open up a little more. I literally just poured it right before making this video. I would still recommend it. This is actually pretty nice and was not expensive. Apparently I paid $19 for it. So yeah, if you can get your hands on the Alteo Chianti Reserva, absolutely go for it. If you have a favorite Chianti, please let me know in the comments. If you have a favorite pairing with your Chianti, if you have some pizza toppings I should try, I'm a sucker for pizza. If I forgot anything that you wanted to talk about, let me know in the comments. And then you should, of course, like, follow, subscribe, whatever, because next time you will never guess where this is. So this image came from National Geographic. I specifically did not put like the slash next to it because this is the country of Georgia. I honestly, I guess this is shame on me. I didn't realize it was this stunning. So next time we will be talking about a wine called Saperavi that is quickly became one of my favorite wines after I had it in one of those wine advent calendars in 2022. So I'm so excited for next week, and I'm really, really excited to share Saperavi with you and some cool stuff about Georgian winemaking and the culture and history and everything. So if you have time between now and then, go grab yourself a Saperavi and you can kind of share it with me. And I look forward to seeing you next week. I should probably know how to say cheers in Italian and I don't. Cheers.